All right. For the audience that does not know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I thank you again for inviting me on. I'm the right corner. I go by RC. That's what my audience has pretty much taglined me as. And I'm a biblically traditional conservative content creator. I've wrote a few books. My most recent one is Reasons to Date a Feminist. So I do a few creative things like that. But mostly I just hit back on a lot of these feminist ideals. I debunk them, atheist ideals, leftist, liberal, Marxist ideals. I hit back on those and I stand for the truth in as godly of a way as I can.
So, what got you into making content?
Long
Did
story short, dating. Once I got out of my relationship of 4 years when I was 22, I I was pretty shielded away from how nasty dating had become, I guess, and feminism and a lot of these liberal cultural values that had been seeping its way into our culture for decades. But I didn't see how nasty it was until I was 22 and I was single again. And I started to try and date from 22 to 26 years old. Each date would just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And my ex girlfriend wasn't like that. I mean, we had our own issues, totally separate from all this entitled feminist ideology and behavior. And I didn't understand what was going on. And it just kept building up in me. And when I would try to reach out to friends, some of them were at least willing to listen to me, but most of them, the times that we were friends, some of them are not, we haven't spoken years, but I would be gaslit and told that, I just hate women and say, well, I'm not telling you I hate women. I'm telling you that what had happened on this date or this entitled behavior I've never been accustomed to before. And they were behaving as though the world owes them something because they're a woman, strictly off the fact that they're a woman, they're deserving of the world and they don't have to live in a traditional way at all. And anyway, it just kept building up and building up. And finally, when I was 26, I said, I had enough of this. I don't care if it loses me every opportunity of being in a relationship again. I'm going to speak out about this. And I surrendered to God having a relationship. I said, I'm not going to keep looking for it anymore. If there's a godly woman out there, then, I put my faith that you'll put her in my life. And now I've been in a relationship for over 2 years, but I'm just putting you on the fast track of how I got to making content. And I just had enough and I wanted to speak against it.
so my one question is this actually kind of perfectly aligns with something I've been kind of like thinking about recently, which is the loneliness of young men, right? Particularly, right? Which I know we didn't speak about in the questions, but just given like why you started content, I think that's a little bit important, and I think you have a very unique insight on this. Which is why are young men so lonely, right? And for context, for the people watching the show, um, you know, there's been countless studies that have shown that in general people are lonelier nowadays, and you can attribute that to social media and the effects of social media and a number of things, right? We're just not as active in person as we used to be, at the very least, right? Which has led to feelings of loneliness and isolation. But in the romantic sense, men specifically are seemingly losing their virginities at a much, much later point in life, right? Which is, starkly different. Usually people were losing it in their teens. Years ago, like before social media was as popular, and before the rise of the internet, and now all of a sudden it's a drastic like difference. Like now people are losing their 20s, which you would say normally there's nothing wrong with, but when it's everybody, there's something different. And when it's not women too, when it's one group of people, it does beg the question, right? And I've spoken to people about it, but I'm wondering what your stance is on that.
So I'm not going to reiterate Jordan Peterson's take on this, or I'm not going to try to glaze this over and make it sound nice. A lot of these guys are losers, and a lot of them don't know why. They believe anything of what they believe. They don't have any convictions. They don't stand for anything. They kind of just go with the wind. They're addicted to pornography. They will do anything to have sex with a woman. They're addicted to following half naked women on Instagram, social media, and they don't have the balls to stand against anything. They really don't have anything to live for. And then, as men in society, I'm under the belief that we are the leaders. We set the example. And as leaders, if you don't stand for anything, no one's going to respect you, especially women. People are not going to want to be your friend, let alone a woman wanting to marry you or submit to you. And guys have to have a purpose, and that purpose has to come from God. And it's not being addicted to pornography. It's not being addicted to having sex with as many women as possible, like the red pill is trying to convince them to do. The red pill just creates more lonely men. But yeah, loneliness is because they don't have a purpose. They're not surrendered to God, a lot of them. And, a lot of those guys will try to blame women for the situation they're in. You're a man, you're the leader. It's your fault. And they don't like hearing that. I lose a lot of followers when I say stuff like that. That's my perspective.
I mean, objectively, if you think about it the other way around, if you were saying that, like, you know, how do I put this? If you were gonna say, just in general at large, right, that men don't want to date unattractive women and then women don't want to date unattractive men, right? I don't think that's a controversial take, right? And I don't think that should be treated as a controversial take. I think objectively, the unfortunate reality is that if you want to be dateable, you either have to have something in common, right? And like love their personality, et cetera, like in a very deep level, or you need to be very attractive in a number of ways. And there's a number of things that get into attraction. I'm not getting into it. You could argue that what I just said is factoring into attraction, but you wouldn't date somebody that you're not attracted to, right? So I don't think what you're saying is wrong, right? But I don't want to make this whole conversation about dating, right? Nothing against you, nothing about this conversation. I would love to, but we do have other questions, and your content is more politically geared. So one thing I do want to ask is about the left. How do you feel about the left in general?
Well, hmm, my knee jerk reaction is to say a lot of very divisive things. The left have totally turned away from God and turned towards hedonism, morally speaking. And it wasn't always that way. They all agreed that gay marriage was wrong like 10 minutes ago and then changed their position on that. They agreed about moral issues. Even the early feminists that, like, is Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the first female presidential candidate that was the first, a lot of these feminists, the first woman that was part of the, well, I forgot the name of the organization. I think it was, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you look up the early feminists, they were all anti abortion and they were all pro life. So it was the Democrats that actually voted against massively women getting the right to vote, the 19th Amendment. So in many ways, the left, the Democrats, if we'll call them that, they were very much in favor of a lot of biblical values. And the left today has disbanded from all of that. I mean, the things that they support are so out of touch with reality. I just don't see how anyone in their right mind, could agree with a child getting puberty blockers in the name of this transgender suicide mission and enabling that kind of behavior. It's so out of touch with reality. We're not talking just simply economic viewpoints that we differ on, which usually was the case between Republicans and Democrats for a long time. Now we're talking about a group that are so immoral. They they're so far out of touch with reality in many ways that, yeah. I but what I see is that it's not like conservatives are that much better. True biblical conservatives are, but the right, the Republican Party, invited a porn star to the RNC. Amber Heard. No, sorry, not Amber Heard, Amber Rose. And brought like some Vishnu worshiper to sing about her demon god at the RNC, and has a bunch of women that work at Fox News and other conservative organizations that dress like hoes and act like hoes. And it's like, it's not that the Republican Party is that much better, right? So I see that culture is the real, the enemy is not the Democrats or the left. The enemy is Satan from a biblical worldview standpoint. And culture has had a very influential effect, pervasive, I'm sorry, I mean to say persuasive effect, not just on the left, but on the right. So the enemy is really culture, or at least that's a tool being used by the enemy. It's not the left, it's not the right. They're both being influenced by it. It just seems that the left is influenced by it quicker, but the right is falling right into it. They're more pro-choice than they've ever been. They're more pro-gay marriage than they've ever been. They're more pro-immodest attire and immodest behavior than they've ever been. They're more anti-traditional values than they've ever been. They're just not as far as the left is. It's just like the left is 100 miles ahead, right? But the right is following right along, right behind them.
How do you feel, or rather, I'm sorry, are there any redeeming qualities to the left?
Of course, there's a lot of things that we can learn from the left. They're very entertaining. The right is boring. They suck at content.
Right.
The Daily Wire, for example, or the Israeli Wire, whatever you want to call them, their content sucks. Their movies that they've made, it sucks. It's boring. The one maybe shining light or silver lining is What is a Woman? It was more funny than anything. I think, but for the most part, conservative media is boring. They're not a redeeming quality of the left is they're very entertaining. They know how to make good music. They know how to make good movies. They know how to make good videos. They know how to entertain people. And they're also very good at appealing to people's emotions. That's how they're able to influence so many to believe in such radical concepts, like a man can be a woman, and changing the definition of men and women, and convincing an entire population of feminists that have been fighting for the rights of women, right? From their own mouth, they'll admit that, have convinced them that they're now fighting for the rights of men that believe that they're women. They're so good at appealing to people's emotion. And they're also very good at steering policy decisions based around fear and lying. They're really good at lying. Now, that's not something we should take from them as learning how to lie, but we should learn how to be more entertaining. We should learn to how to appeal to people's emotions better, make better content. Um, so those are some of the redeemable qualities that come to mind.
Just to follow that up, are there any flaws in the right that you wish would be brought up more?
Well, I would just echo what I've already said, but the flaws are being influenced by culture. When I'm going to just name drop. So if you want to keep it, keep it. If not, censor it out. But when I see people on the right that are hired by PragerU, like Xavier, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's a liberal gay DEI hire, literally. I'm not making any of that up. Pro-choice, pro-gay marriage. He's gay himself. He's a token black person that was hired. He wasn't there based off of merit. He's there because he's an Israeli shill. That's not good for the right. Putting up someone like that to represent us is not good. That doesn't represent conservative biblical traditional values. And when we talk about conservative in the United States, I keep bringing up the Bible. It's because it is Christian. We're not living in Saudi Arabia. We're over there. It's Islam. We're not living in Israel. We're over there. It's Judaism. We're living in the United States, which has a Christian moral system. All right. So when you hire people like him and you put them on massive platforms like Fox News, um, Pierce Morgan, big podcasts, have their own network on PragerU, their own channel, being, that starts to redefine what conservatism is. And we're not some big tent that starts to adopt liberal values, accept gay marriage, accept, because then at some point you're going to accept the transgender ideology, which a lot of the right already has to some degree. Then you're going to accept that drag queens can read books to children in school and accept that LGBT is going to be taught to kids in school. They're not accepting all of that yet, but they're on the path of accepting it when you start bringing in people like him that start to desensitize true conservative values and shift away from it. We shouldn't be poster childing people like him, poster childing people like Emily Saves America, who's sexually, absolutely. And adopting liberal ideologies, absolutely. We shouldn't be poster childing people like that, right? We shouldn't be inviting someone like Amber Rose to the RNC, who's literally a porn star that has an OnlyFans account, that has a movement called the Slut Walk LA that empowers women to live a slutty lifestyle, accepts LGBT and all of that, and says, and then say, oh, but this person's voting for Trump, so let's poster child them. No, you can vote for whoever you want to vote for, but you don't represent us. We're conservative. And what does conservative mean? It means traditional as well. Where do we get traditional values from? The Bible. We're Christian. So if you don't support that and you want to vote for Trump, that's fine. You can consider yourself a Republican, but don't start redefining what conservative means.
My follow up to that would be, why are more people, especially young men, leaving the left and going to the right? Because this is a trend I think everybody's seeing, which is that men are vastly going to the right, and you could even argue that women are going way more to the left, which I don't know much about that. I know much more about men going to the right. Which, what's your perspective? Why are so many men leaving the left, especially famous people too?
I haven't heard a lot of guys leaving the left and going to the right. I'll tell you my opinion on maybe some that have done that. But a lot of young guys going to the right is because guys biologically, for the most part, are more logical and common sense. They're not as emotional. And when I say that, I know that triggers some people, but testosterone affects our brain and the development differently than it does women, and when we're kids to teenagers to adolescents. Testosterone has a unique effect on the brain than estrogen does. So just biologically speaking, we are different. We think different. And you even see that with like trans men, trans women. Once they start injecting themselves with testosterone or estrogen, whatever it is, their hormone thing that they're getting on, they start acting different too. So now to the question of why are there young men going to that? Because I think they're more logical, common sense, and it's just radical what the left is pushing. It's so out of touch and it's not working. They're not being able to sell their fear mongering to guys, to young guys, because they're more logical based. Why are guys on the left going to the right? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought I disconnected there. I think a lot of guys on the
You just disconnected. Hello? 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 Hey, yeah, you just disconnected. Hey.
yeah, yeah, that was weird.
Okay. No, it's fine. I can hear you now.
Why a lot of guys on the left are going to the right? Yeah, I haven't really seen that. Maybe because they see that it's not working. I would be careful with that though, because like that guy had mentioned, Xavier, he claims to have come from the left to the right. But with it, he's still kind of bringing all his liberal values over. He's just, so is it true the right, or are they, because of maybe the trans thing is too extreme for them, that they're like, okay, I'm going to go to the right now, but I still accept all of these anti-conservative stances. So I'm going to go to the right and I still want to do whatever I want to do, whatever I want to act, believe whatever I want to believe. It's just that the trans thing was too far for me. So now I'm going to consider myself a conservative. You're not a conservative. maybe you can consider yourself Republican. So when we say right, I don't know, what are they right wing about? Economics? Are they right wing about it? Because a lot of guys will consider, or, a lot of these people will say, well, I went from the left to the right. And they still believe in a lot of this bull crap about dressing and acting immodestly and dating whoever they want, marrying whoever they want. That's not conservative. That's not right wing at all. So yeah, I don't know what they mean by right wing. If they went from left to right, that means that they've accepted Christian moral standards, have accepted traditional values, and have stayed, pushed heathenism away. Then I would say, okay, you did go from the left to the right. You've denied hedonism and accepted Christ. And at least, even if you're not a Christian, maybe you've at least accepted Christian moral standards and you respect it. And you don't try to shift Christian morality away from the, moral groundwork of the conservative movement. If that's the case, then I would also accept, okay, they went from the left to the right. They're a conservative now. Or at least
Well,
they respect they're
I think I should
respected.
clarify my question. I think I should clarify my question a little bit, if that helps, right? And I don't want to interrupt. I feel like I should clarify this.
Sure.
So this is something I noticed in like the past, I want to say 5-ish years, but it's been a little bit longer than that at this point. So I'll give you an example. So like I'm gonna say like in 4th grade when Donald Trump won the election, like the original election, 2016, right? I was very young. Now I'm a senior in high school, just to put in perspective the amount of time. And throughout that whole time period from 2016 to 2020, people hated Donald Trump, right? That was my perspective, right? Then again, I'm in Jersey, which is a very Democrat place, like very left for the most part.
Right.
And so, but from my perspective, I feel like it was just constantly on the news how bad Donald Trump was, right? And I felt that way too, right? For various reasons. At the time I felt that way. And I don't want to talk too much about how I feel now, but with that being said, then around this election, which was, then after like Joe Biden's presidency, I felt like people fell out of favor with the left quite a lot, and it showed with the election results, considering that not only did Donald Trump win against Kamala Harris, but he won by a drastic margin, right? He won, I want to say, almost every single state, with the exception of the ones that had cities that, when there's like even the statement where it's like there's not even blue states, there's blue cities, right? Even California, right? It was such a drastic shift. What I was saying was that everybody in the nation was agreeing with BLM at the time. And everybody in the nation, I felt like, was hating on Donald Trump for the way that he handled COVID and for the things he was saying during COVID and after the election and during the election. And then you got January 6th on top of that. Like everybody was super against Donald Trump, right? Which I think is, I think it's safe to say that he was represented with the right. And Biden won the popular vote. Then this election, it's the complete opposite. People saw a lot of faults, I think, even including myself, like with the Biden administration. And then immediately afterwards, people went, we got to get Trump back in, which is saying a lot because he was so hated, right, for such a long time. And he won for the first time in 20 years as a Republican, the popular vote, right? Which is, that's not like, it's not like a small difference, right? I think that's a tremendous shift in 4 or 5 years, right? It's not like it was a close tie. In the polls, people were saying that, but in the actual results, it was not. So my point is, why such a drastic shift, and why are so many young men, like even at my school, I feel like, the way that people reacted when Trump won, it was still kind of bad, but way more people are open about being Trump supporters now. If you said that in 2016 or in 2020, you would have been hung on a cross, like, what I'm saying? Like, you would have been crucified for that. That's like, that was the most controversial thing you could have said. Now, being a Trump supporter is like Joe Rogan's a Trump supporter, and he was on the left, right? Russell Brand, who was also infamously on the left, who's now a Trump supporter. I think Bill Maher, who, hated Donald Trump. I think it's Bill Maher. And then he had a dinner with him, and then he started liking him. Elon Musk, who in 2017 called Trump a con man, is now his like top advisor. RFK, who said, and then you RFK as well, who's a Democrat and then became an independent, who said that, Trump, neither candidate, Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, later on, were fitting candidates, and now he's working in his administration, right? And it goes on and on and on. I can name all the examples, right? but I just don't see that with the left. I don't see. I for a time maybe I did. I might have seen that the other way around, but I didn't really see people going from the right to the left. I saw people at the left, like starting at the left as I was growing up, and completely shift to the right.
Mm,
And is that for better or for worse? I don't know. That's not my place to say in this interview.
mhm.
But from your stance, why did this happen?
Okay. A lot was said. Let me first start with I thought you were like 20. I didn't know you were a senior in high school. I apologize because I should be setting a better example. I shouldn't have said a few of the things that I've said. So I'm sorry for that. Are you 18?
Yes, I'm 18. You can say whatever you
Okay.
want. I'm a big boy.
I no, I know, but I still have to set an example because I'm a little bit older than you. I didn't realize you were in high school. So let me just start with that. I'm gonna answer all your questions, but um I don't let my some of my emotions and anger toward this confused from the fact that Christ is our, Jesus Christ is our moral standard. And sometimes the things I say and act don't reflect him, but I want to point back to him. So I should be setting a better example. I shouldn't have spoke about some of these subjects the way I did. I just have a really strong view on it because of things that I've experienced. So I just wanted to make that clear. Secondly, to answer your questions, I see where you're coming from with left to the right. I'm just, it may seem like splitting hairs to some, but I don't accept that Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, any of these people are right wing. They can vote Republican. I would say they went from Democrat to Republican. But right wing for me carries a lot more meaning than just you're Republican. It means that you've accepted a conservative lifestyle too. Um, but a lot of these people, to answer your question, why did they go from Democrat to Republican? Well, man, a lot of people are sheep. Okay. So, including some of these big podcasters, they're sheep. Whatever is more convenient of a position and opinion to hold and is going to get them the least amount of pushback, they're probably going to agree with. But it's the reality, right? Because those the same leftists, and here's my point. Let me first answer your question, then I have a point to make. But to answer your question, a lot of people were just sick and tired of the left setting this moral precedent of you listen to us, we tell you what's right and wrong. And if you dare go against BLM, for example, at that very tumultuous, emotional time in 2020, then we're going to come for you, figuratively and literally. We're going to come for your job. We're going to come for your family. We're going to come for you legally and literally. We will hurt you. You better agree with us. I had people threatening me at that time, and I didn't have an account. A public account. I wasn't doing TikTok or anything. But here's the precedent that I want to set. The point I want to make is we don't allow the left to tell us what words we can and can't say. They tell us you can't slur, you can't say these words. Now, I'm not encouraging people to do that. But what I'm saying is don't be the reason you're not doing it is because the left has set the precedent. Because it's the same people on the left, okay, that told you George Floyd was an innocent man that was killed and Derek Chauvin's an evil guy, right? But it's the same people that celebrate that Carmelo Anthony, they set up a GoFundMe and donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to a kid that just killed an innocent white kid at a track meet, right? It's the same left that told you to take the vaccine and you're a monster if you don't support BLM and you're a monster if you don't do X, Y, or Z. It's the same left that supported Luigi putting a bullet in the head of an innocent CEO just because they didn't agree with United Healthcare's policy decisions when he became CEO in 2021. We shouldn't be allowing the left to dictate morality. And it upsets me when I see organizations on the right and people on the right being afraid of saying or doing things because of the left. And I think that's why a lot of people have said to hell with these moral high horse positions that leftist people hold. They're so out of touch and they can see it, they feel it, they hear it. They have felt it and they've left almost out of an act of rebellion. I don't think that's long lasting though, but I think temporarily, I mean, it benefited Trump. But to not go on much longer, that's hopefully that answered your question.
So you think, because this is something I've heard from multiple people, which is that you think that the left went too left, right? Basically, like you think that the left went far enough to where people hated the left. Because I do agree with that. I can generally agree with that statement. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're saying, where you're saying that the left went too far with their methods and their ideologies, and as a result, it led to a lot of people getting frustrated with them.
Well, kind of. The left it's if they were principled, right? Then I think that they wouldn't have lost as many people. But the problem is that they're hypocritical jerks. So,
well, one of my last questions is going to be, why have we become so divided? Which I feel like we've touched on a lot. If you could sum that up at the very least, and to solve division, do you think that we should talk more or less about politics?
well, I'll just use myself as an example of why I think we've become so divided. Just from my experience, because at the end of the day, this is just a human communication thing. It's just humans either miscommunicating or not agreeing. That's what it comes down to. So I know that, before I started airing my opinions, even before I started speaking about them publicly online, I mean, before that, I was quiet about politics. I didn't try to stir up trouble. Even if I disagreed with someone, that didn't cause any division. But once I started to mature, you know, 24, 25, 26 years old, and started to see things differently and start to outline what my core values are. And then I started speaking about it. Massive division. Friends of mine that I'd been friends for years cut off. Opportunities that I would have had before cut off. Women that treated me nicely before treated me like I'm a monster. That's where a lot of the divisiveness will come in, is it's a difference in values. So can we solve it without talking about politics? Well, no, I don't think so. Politics is downstream from culture, and culture is made up of your belief system, your worldview, and a few other, characteristics. But culture is it's what drives politics. So, in other words, your values take precedent, and then your politics will follow through. So the way you vote's based upon your values. You don't, so your political view is going to be based upon your values, right? You get what I'm saying? So that takes precedent, and it's a difference of opinions and values is what caused divisiveness. So yeah, I just felt that in my own life, once I started airing my verbally expressing what my values were, my opinions and stuff, that's when a lot of divisiveness came in. And I started posting about it online, saying it to my friends. It caused massive division. So it wasn't the politics that did it. Politics are a reflection of your values. That's a better way of putting it, for the most part. So it's really just a difference in values. And it gets people very triggered because you're hitting at things that are core to them. So,
well, one thing I do want to ask is, and I think this is one of my other last, because this is towards the end of the
ask
interview.
as many questions, man.
Yeah.
I like them.
Thank you. So let's, I feel like it's impossible to talk about the right without talking about Donald Trump in the modern era, right? It's impossible. You can't avoid it. And Trump has become the face of the modern right. Now, whether that's for better or for worse is a completely different debate. But I guess with somebody like him, like, what are your thoughts on that phenomenon of, like, if you like Donald Trump, like the judgment of the opinion of Donald Trump, not even the
Mhm.
opinion of him, because nobody
Right.
really talks about the judgment of the opinion of him. Like,
Right. Well, the left's view of him, I think it's mostly grounded in what they think he is. So, I mean, of course, there's comments that he's made that will kind of bolster up what their perceived view of him. But here's how most of the left views Trump. Okay, he's homophobic, transphobic, pro-life, hates women. He's sexist, misogynistic. Okay, they think he's like that. That's what causes a lot of divisiveness. Honestly, I wish he was a lot more like that. And when I say that, I don't mean that actually misogynistic in terms of hating women. I wish that he was more of a biblically traditional man, because that I wish that he was more of the version they perceive him as. I do wish that, but he's not. And that's my point, is that a lot of the things they think he is, he's not anti-gay marriage. He's very much a proponent of gay marriage. He's been maybe the most pro-gay marriage Republican ever. So he's not homophobic. He's not transphobic. He's not sexist. He has like more women in his cabinet than maybe many Republicans in the past. He puts them in leadership positions. So it's the perception of what they've been told he is. And that's what causes a lot of divisiveness. Because anytime when you're dealing with people that are hedonistic and reject Christian morals, and you have someone that is either truly a, traditional Christian, or is being marketed as one, because a lot of the Christian community will market Trump like he's this godsend for us. So when it comes to the left, it's the perception that he's going to be anti all of these secular values like gay marriage, etc. But he's not. Now, when it comes to divisiveness on the right, it's not for the same reason, obviously. A lot of the people on the right, well, there's not many people on the right that don't like Trump, right? But the disagreement with Trump from people on the right, from especially Christians, could be, well, he's a liar. He lies a lot. I'm not saying that I agree with that. I'm saying that that's their disagreement with him. And that maybe he's not Christian enough, or he's not actually traditional enough, or that maybe he's too much of a supporter of Israel. Like he's not nationalistic enough. So the disagreement that comes from the right is for very different reasons, and the divisiveness. But he's divisive. Honestly, though, I don't understand why. He's really not that divisive of a person.
Well,
In my view, I don't see him as that divisive of a person at all. I'm trying to illustrate to you why I think others might be divided by him. But he's really like lukewarm. He's really not that divisive.
and I think you were saying that a little bit before, which is the jokes and the comments that he's made about women specifically, right?
Let's pause for a moment.
Yeah.
So, because I want to capture a few things that you were saying before it gets lost. So he's been an A-list celebrity his entire adult life. So of course they've dug into the archives to find as much dirt on him as possible. And honestly, that's all they were able to find. Like, of course, some of the things are not good. Some of the things that were said were not good, but that's all that they were able to find. Man, if I was an A-list celebrity my entire adult life, I'd be happy if that's all they could find on me.
No,
And a lot of these other politicians that have such a refined view, they weren't an A-list celebrity their entire adult life, that have a, laundry list of an archive that can be dug into of things that they've said publicly on national television and elsewhere. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight is, in 2015, he was not necessarily a politician. He's definitely a politician now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
100%.
yeah. So they can't wield that against him. The guy's obviously a politician now. And I would argue that he was very assimilated with politics then, because he was always in the pockets of congressmen and senators for
Right.
decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
he's been aware about politics for a while.
yeah. No, I get that. And I agree with you to some extent, like that. Yeah, like I do think, but there's also things that like people don't talk about, right? Which is less infamous than the grab him by the you know what statement, which is on and Howard Stern, right? There was a one time where he was talking about how, oh, when you're the owner of a pageant, you can, go into, basically the locker rooms and everybody's changing, and he's like bragging about that, right? And that's like that's messed up. Like I can't like even if he's like just I don't know, because that's not really a joke. Like that's just something he's saying, right? I can't agree with that, right? I can't support that, and I don't think that's like and as a Christian, as a person, just in general, that's just not a good thing to say.
No, it's not a good thing to say.
Right, and yeah, yeah. So in general, like, there's another one too, and this is something that nobody talks about, which is he sees a 10-year-old girl, and I can send you the video, but he's at Trump Tower, and I guess he's like on an escalator, and he sees a 10-year-old girl, and he's like, "Oh, can you believe I'm going to be dating her in 10 years?" Also, if that's a joke, that's messed up. Like, you can't joke about that. And he has a history of saying that, right? Now, I don't think that's okay, and Trump himself would probably say that's also not okay, at least in public. But with that being said, you don't have politicians that talk like that. So when you do, it's like, whoa, like you.
Whoa. You see, but hold on. How do you know that though? Because like I said, he's been
that publicly known. That are that publicly known. That's what I should have said. That
but they very much could have been talking like that, or worse. But they're not an A-list celebrity their entire adult life, so they weren't recorded saying it.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Is just like they weren't as known. Like I can't. With some like maybe like a few things that Joe Biden has said, right? Definitely Hunter Biden, but like I can't think of that much with politicians. Now I do want to wrap this up a little bit. Sure. I did like this interview though. What advice would you give to young people?
Turn to Christ. That's what our forefathers did. You can look at the statistics. If we start in 1962, the Supreme Court made a decision to take prayer out of public schools, rip God out of the hearts of the youth. And you can look at crime rates, suicide rates, murder rates, crime rates all across the board, actually. And you can see the consequences that the more we turn away from God as a nation, that you can taste the fruit that bears. You can see the fruits of a godly nation that we were for a long time. Of course, it wasn't perfect. We're still human beings. We're not perfect. But you can see how God blessed our nation when we mostly were submitted to his authority, right? But once we're like proudly rejecting God and saying, okay, it worked for this amount of time, but we're done with that. That's just a fantasy story. It's not real. Let's start teaching kids about evolution and LGBT and start teaching them about all the things that are immoral and not real and pretend like it's real and moral. And then, rip out teaching godly morals. We see the consequences of that. So I would say to young people, politics isn't going to save you. Money's not going to save you. Exercise is not going to save you. All these things can do you good in the short term. But there's a reason that for thousands of years, the only thing that could save people was turning their life over to Christ. And just real quick to make it like realistic, because I know that just kind of sounds maybe crazy to some, or other people are listening to that and saying amen to that. Let me just make it kind of logical, rational, reasonable. We would probably agree that, therapy works for the most part, like cognitive behavioral therapy, sit down talk therapy. It helps with depression. It can help with anxiety. It can help with addiction, right? Would you agree that it helps? or just outright works?
Yeah. Look, can you see my my camera? I'm giving a thumbs up.
Oh, okay, got you. So we know it works, or we believe it works rather, because of the testimony that people give that, I had an addiction, I was depressed, I was anxious, whatever they were struggling with. And after going to therapy for who knows how long, their addictions turned around or they improved in what they were suffering with. So you have testimonies of people, because that's really the only thing you could base it on. I mean, you could give them brain scans and see if, areas in their brain improved or something. So you could have some kind of measure. But you do the same thing with people that turn their life over to Christ. Billions of testimonies, people that ended addiction, their depression went away or was significantly reduced, anxiety, whatever that they were struggling with, right? So that's the same test that you do for therapy, which they uphold as like, our society puts therapy up and worships it almost. But the only thing we could base it on are people's testimony. And when we look at, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a faith-based program to end addiction, it's more effective than non-faith-based systems to end addiction. So turn to Christ. And not because I'm telling you so, just do your research. And there's a reason that our forefathers were surrendered to him. And there's a reason that families stay together, less divorce. And some people could say, oh, it's because divorce wasn't legal. Well, that's not true. It was just a little more difficult to get a divorce, but it's not because of the laws. Definitely not. Because the happiness index of women has been on a steep decline since being free of the patriarchy. You could look at a Yale study for one. The happiness index paradox of women in the last 100 years. So overall, and I know I keep getting back to this because this is the most important point, is that when we reject God, when we push him away and we say, we've got it, that's just an archaic view. That's old. We believe in science. We're not crazy. So we're going to reject these archaic old beliefs and we're going to adopt these new progressive ideas because, we're reasonable people. You see the fruits of it though. Suicide skyrocketing, divorce skyrocketing, depression skyrocketing, obesity skyrocketing, crime skyrocketing. The fruits don't taste very good. So I just will encourage young guys, young women to do what their forefathers would agree with me, is to turn back to God.
And with that, I'm going to stop the recording. We'll talk after the show, right?
Cool, man. Thank you.
All right. 3, 2, 1.